everyone, assalamu alaikum. Here we'll take a look how to use hydrated Cubit to manage the storage or to have storage state management in Flutter BLoC using Cubit. But we have to know that Cubit is a subset of Flutter BLoC. So if you whatever the things we could do, pretty much we could also do using Cubit, the same thing. Now here one thing, let's take a look first. So if we restart our app, we will see that here it says that this is getting loading and loaded. So what we are doing over here, we are trying to load a JSON file from our local environment from the device, and we want to store it and maintain the state. Now of course, each time you reboot the app, you don't want to load the app, you don't want to load this JSON file, because you just want to load it once and then you want to store it locally in the device itself. So how to do that? Now in general, if we don't store our JSON data inside the device, each time you reboot your app, that gets rebooted every time and the data gets loaded every time. That also means that if we have done some operation previously on our device, they also would get lost. Now to get rid of this thing, to get a workaround on this, we have to use hydrated Cubit. Now if you have Cubit in your application, like for example over here we are using Flutter BLoC, so actually if you install Flutter BLoC, you can access to Cubit, and if you install hydrated BLoC, then you can access to hydrated Cubit. So we have to have those two packages to be able to store our data and get the data exactly same as before storing, and we have to do it using hydrated BLoC. Hydrated BLoC helps you with storing information in the device, which works with the Flutter BLoC directly. Now how to work with this, let's take a look over here. So this is a Cubit. Now this Cubit, as we saw earlier, that doesn't save the data, it's not persistent. Now the first thing we want to do, convert this Cubit to hydrated Cubit. How to do that? So here we just simply write hy like this, hydrated. Okay, so hydrated Cubit. Once you do that, now you have to do one thing, you have to override from JSON method and to JSON method. You have to override from JSON and to JSON. Overriding means that you have to do your own stuff inside there. Now first we'll take a look how to use it to JSON. We have to remember one thing, this to JSON method gets called first time, or install your app, actually pretty much when you install your app first time. Now let's go ahead and verify that. Now one thing, if we do have hydrated Cubit, we have to use this hydrated storage.build method. Once you do that, it'll find the storage inside your device, inside the hardware itself, and store your data. And then at the same time, you also have to use this hydrated BLoC overrides using this special function which is a run zoned. So we have to have this to mechanism. If you don't have this to, it's not going to store your data. Now since we have this build method and run zoned, they are ready. Now we are going to restart our app from the scratch and we'll see what happens. Now here we do see that we have a log over here. It says I'm in to.json. Now what is this to.json method? This is the to.json method this is the to.json method that I told you. Now to.json method tries to store the JSON information. Remember, we want to load a JSON file from our API or somewhere from the device itself and then store it. So that's why first time this is the method that gets called. So it tries to look for JSON data, and if it can find, this is the right place where you do the operation to save the data in your device itself. We saw that this is the first thing that pretty much get called first. Now of course it gets called first, but here we do see something interesting. So here I do have a state. Now inside the state, as you see over here, we run a for loop. Actually this for loop, this work state is pretty much empty. So So that's why it doesn't go inside this. So which means that we are not going to run for loop. So we print this one. Okay, so this is pretty much that we don't have any state. Why? Because the first time you load your app, or you install your app, actually there is no data, because the very first time it's all empty. So it couldn't save anything. So that's why it just returns from here directly instead of doing any operation like this. Of course, whatever kind of operation you do, it's all up to you. But this is the right place for storing data. So what's happening one more time? So you'll see we load data. Okay. Now this loading JSON file actually comes from this method, which is called getWorkouts. Now we do see that this gets called immediately. Right after this, as you can see, we do have a log which it says that getWorkouts being called. So anyway, toJSON method gets called and it can't find any states over here, which means data, they were not saved previously. So what do we do in our app? Actually, we call this one. Where we call it from? As you see over here. So inside this multi-block provider, we created an object, an instance of this workouts Cubit, which is this one we have seen early. And then over here, we try to look for states. Well, initially, very first time we install our app, the states are all empty. We check that. If it is, then we go ahead and call this method. So this is the method, and this is the method that prints out this information. So what do we understand from here? Even before we check any kind of states in our app from our multi-block provider, toJSON method gets called. So what it does, it tries to save information. But of course, because nothing has been loaded, because this has not been called yet, nothing has been loaded. So over here, toJSON method pretty much actually returns as empty. So this JSON would return an empty list for us inside this map key value. So toJSON method is very important. This is what gets called first time when you install your app, but this is also gets called more times as you go through the data, work on the data. So now over here we do see that we have a method, or we have a printing message where it says that I'm printing state. Now here we do see this one. So what happened, somehow once this method gets called, this toJSON method gets called automatically once we are done with this loading. As we are done with this loading, later on this toJSON method gets called, and we could see it from here that this is the message that gets printed over here with some state or some data. So once you load your data automatically, hydrated Cubit knows automatically that hey, you have loaded some data, so toJSON method gets called. And how about this from JSON method? Now, just now we have seen that if we install our app first time, we do see toJSON. Let's restart our app right now, and we'll see that this toJSON method doesn't get called first time, and this will also not get called because data has been loaded, and because we are using hydrated Cubit, it remembers and it knows that data has been loaded. Not only it remembers, it confirms internally that there is data, nothing changes the data, so it doesn't reload the data, and which is very efficient for us. So let's go ahead and restart our app. Now here we do see that this time it called from JSON method, it didn't call toJSON, and we also see that we don't have this one. Perfect. Now why this method get called? Because second time when you reboot your app, definitely you want to load the data wherever you have saved in your device, because you want to load them and at the same time you want to show it to the UI. Of course, on our UI we don't see anything, but the idea is first time once you save your data through toJSON, next time you reboot your app, from JSON method would get called automatically, and inside this you can grab the data. How to grab the data? The data key value, which the key you have used earlier, that one. So over here we have used workouts. Now over here we exactly use the same key and then we retrieve the data, and then we will return. Of course, what we do with this data is all up to you. We can definitely visualize it. So yes, these are the two most important methods that you should be taking care and know more how to use if you use hydrated Cubit to store data and your states. Thank you.